this segment, we have Yves LaRose, and we will be talking about, and he will be talking about worker proposal systems. And so, aloha, Yves. Again, thanks for being here. Nice having you.
Aloha, Ky. Yeah,
All
thanks for
right.
having me. Thank you very much for the DACAthon and everything that is to come for everybody here.
Fantastico. Yeah, first question is, why should we use a DAC versus a traditional organization?
EOS Nation, for example, is a DAC internally. A lot of people don't know that, but the way that we were set up, we're a DAC internally with the founders. And the reason why we do it is for trust. And a lot of the DACs that we've seen being set up is just that initial trust. You're able to, I guess, split up permissions, especially using EOS.io as a backend. We thought that it was the perfect software to be able to use the permissions within to be able to split the trust and really highlight that trust to the community. And so if you're building applications or you're building anything that will require some type of interaction with users, the DApps, in my opinion, just start off with a higher level of trust than a traditional organization.
How are DACs going to impact our lives or change the world?
I think that the DACs are already impacting your lives and changing the world. I think that the world, as it is going right now, is becoming more and more global. We're removing more and more borders, and we're working people just like you and I right now are in completely two different locations. And DACs, again, going back to that trust, they really kind of enable teams from all around the world, or people from all around the world, to work towards a common goal with common guidelines and common, I guess, set rules ingrained within the system that they're in. So as I said, I think they're already changing the world, and I think it's just the beginning. They will change and they will impact the world as we know it even further.
What are the biggest obstacles you've had or do you see in building DACs?
The biggest obstacle, I think, in building a DAC is that centralized systems are quite efficient at the onset. It's very easy for a centralized system to make decisions and to move along, especially in a period of time when you begin, when you start something. You're going through multiple iterations, and having that centralization makes things much easier. So I think one of the biggest obstacles with a DAC or you're building systems through DACs is that it is challenging in the beginning, and you seem to see the pace of things a little bit slower. But as we have more DACs being popped up and people getting used to the concept of DACs more and more, I think that barrier to getting set up in a quick and efficient manner will go down over time.
Meaning more and more solutions will be proposed.
Yeah, it'll just be easier. You're going to have more tools. You're going to have access to more tools. People just have more experience. They'll be used to running within a DAC, and so they'll have lessons learned. Just the way that they interact with the DAC or with the other DAC, let's say custodians, will be different than how they would typically interact with an organization, which is probably what they know now, and they don't know anything else. And so it'll be not just the system itself, but the participants on how they interact with the system will start changing as it becomes more and more normal.
Wow, that's a great answer. Actually, it's a fantastic answer. Thank you for that. What are some specific actions or tools are needed to improve building DACs currently? Obviously, we're just at the very beginning, so there's plenty of things.
Yeah.
Name a few that you think are the kind of key important things for the DACathoners to just kind of, keep pay attention to when they were today.
Well, I mean, some of the specific tools, I guess, would be, I've got a lot of love for EOS DAC. So the DAC factory that they've built and that they're continuing to build, that as a specific tool to improve the building of DACs, I think is key right now. As you said, Ky, we're really, really early on, so we don't have many tools, we don't have many actions, and we're really building the basic blocks. We're really building the foundation of DACs using blockchain technology, right? So I think that some of the specific actions that are not tool-wise, so DAC Factory would kind of be the tool that would get you going. I think that if it's possible, the challenges, again, going back to the other question and what would be needed to improve the building of DACs is how do you integrate that human layer? Because a lot of the interaction through DACs, I guess typically one of the premises is that people are in different locations or they're not together. So how do you keep that human interaction that you would typically have in a centralized organization when you and I can go have a coffee, can go have lunch, we can get a lot of things done in person or even connect at a different level when we're in person. How do you integrate that within globalized, I guess, DAC systems? I think that's something that somebody should work on, and maybe it's either processes. There's a lot of YouTubers out there and a lot of podcasters that are talking about this, and I heard some really good ones that are talking about specific things that you can do to ensure that you kind of keep that human element. And one of them is, if typically in a centralized organization you're the type of person that likes to go do water cooler talk, or you like to go have a coffee with somebody, do the same thing, but set it up as a Zoom call. And literally, you and I would just get on a Zoom call with our coffee, and we talk about the same thing that we normally talk about when we go to Starbucks or whatever it is. And those little actions really will strengthen that kind of the kind of community feeling within the DAC custodians, or within your community if you're interacting outside of the custodians as well. Because it can be quite impersonal when you're always on telephone calls or always on Zoom calls and you're never in person. There is something that's magical when you meet people. So another thing as well is, if it's possible, to meet once every 6 months or once every year, if possible, to meet the people and actually go somewhere, have a retreat. We do that through YAS Nation. The last year for our 1-year anniversary, we flew everybody in the same location, and we just hung out at the cottage together for a couple of days. And the level of interaction that we were able to have was at a deeper level. It was at a different level than what we usually have, even though we talk to each other on Zoom every day and Telegram, social media. But being in person is very different. And then just doing some silly activities as well together, it just brings out that human component, which then, once everybody goes back to their respective locations, then it really, I think, improves the quality and the efficiency of the work that then gets output afterwards.
That's fantastic.
And I think that's like something that people really forget about, because they'll focus on the tools, but behind the tools they're humans, and those humans have a need for interaction, for social interaction.
Wow. Yeah, well said. That's really something I'm also thinking about a lot, and along with governance and such. So, thank you. That's well said. So something to think about, guys. Thinking of ways how humans can interact, and bringing that human layer. All right. So moving forward to worker proposal systems. What are the key benefits of worker proposal systems compared to traditional organizations?
The main key benefit that I foresee, and I guess from my perspective, a lot of it is within the EOS.io realm. But even if I take it if I abstract it, the big difference in the main key benefit from a worker proposal style system versus traditional org would be, it's a bottom-up approach versus a top-down approach. And so when you've got a top-down approach, you're going to have the leaders within the organization, which are going to tell people what to do, and people then focus on that vision, that mission statement, whatever it is, and align within that vision. Whereas with one of the benefits of a worker proposal system is that you technically have the workers come to you or to management or whoever the decision makers are. In this case, it's the token holders or the VPs or whatever. They come to you and they say, this is what we believe is important. And they have that power to be able to, in our case with the worker proposal system, put it on chain with actual funding attached, with milestones, deadlines, et cetera. And so I think that that's the main key benefit, is you're able to complete the cycle. Not only do you have the top down, you're now integrating the bottom up.
What are the biggest disadvantages of worker proposal systems compared to traditional organizations?
Biggest disadvantage of a worker proposal system is the inherent risk factor. And I think we're going to touch on that a little bit later. But the idea that in order to have a successful worker proposal system, you need to be comfortable with a certain level of risk, which is no different than a traditional organization where you have kind of the top-down approach. However, the top-down approach is I guess how you can say that you have somebody that you can point to that should technically be the leader of the organization or leaders of the organization that are comfortable with making that decision. And they're the ones that are accountable for that decision. Whereas when you've got a bottom-up approach, who's responsible for that? Is it the people that approved it, or is it the people that suggested it? And what we need to be careful with a WPS system is that even if something doesn't work, it's not necessarily the fault of the people, or there should be blame that's placed necessarily on the people that proposed the idea. There are a lot of variables that are at play that maybe that particular team or whoever couldn't control at the time of input of the proposal. And so one of the big disadvantage, again, is that inherent risk, and then the I think easy to blame atmosphere that can result when funds are let's say lost, or value wasn't created as much as originally intended.
Right, because if I may elaborate on this one real quickly. So usually, you have HR and they go through a hiring process, and they're, looking at resumes and hiring the best guy for the best job from that top-down approach. In this one, it's anybody could come in, and there isn't really any vetting of who's really the expert. But we're going to listen to, because we want to build an equitable system and begin experimenting with these. Let's listen to everybody, and let's really listen to the people and build a company or corporation or cooperative. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that when we're not knowing people's level of expertise to a certain degree?
You've just got to be comfortable with it. I think so. In Rio, we talked about this a lot. So we had the unconference days in Rio, where we really delved into the worker proposal and kind of what we thought the BPs that were present, the DApp builders that were present, developers, all the stakeholders that were present. We really delved into, if we were to have such a system, kind of what is the base minimum requirement. At the end of the day, there will be a certain level of waste, there will be a certain level of risk. We need to be comfortable with that, as long as if the end output goal of the system as a whole is more value is created than value is lost, then you've done something good. And what's difficult with that is, how do you judge that? What kind of metric do you use? And a lot of it is really subjective. And so how do you abstract the subjective and really focus on the tangible metrics as much as possible, but still somehow give weight to that subjectivity? And so as long as at the end you believe, and that the majority of the participants in the system believe, that more value is created than value was lost, even if value is lost, and that's a premise, is that value will be lost, then it's okay, and it's a successful system. And that's really difficult. Like, you need to be okay that value will be lost somehow, and that a certain level of value loss is acceptable. And that's difficult for whole ecosystems to I guess, accept.
These are new.
Well, and the idea right now is we're stagnant in a way, because if you're not comfortable with a certain level of risk or loss, then you just don't do anything. So the alternative is, well, there's no innovation, there's no improvement, there's nothing, because you're afraid of potentially making a mistake. And that results in stagnation, no innovation. So in order to innovate, you need to be comfortable with risk. And that, I mean, now we're talking about a WPS system, which is network wide. But if you go within your own company or even your own life, if you want to grow as a person, you need to take a risk. So how do you translate that to an organizational level or to a network level? It's tricky, but you need to be able to be comfortable with that if you want to continue innovating.
That's why we're here at the DACAthon, and that's why we're all out here experimenting with DACs, so we can
exactly.
go ahead and begin figuring this stuff out and see what would happen if we created this system where there would be more innovation from its constituents. So that's phenomenal. Thank you so much for that. Let's go ahead and move on to the next question. What are the key design elements to think about when creating a successful WPS system?
So I guess the key design elements to creating I'm careful by saying a successful WPS system, because we have WPS systems, and then the success right now is subjective based on who you are. If you've applied for WPS funds and you weren't approved, well, perhaps the system for you is not successful, but it doesn't mean that the system isn't successful. And just because the system has I guess released some funds, it doesn't also mean that value was created. So it's kind of tricky, but I'll go with does it take, as far as I can tell, to create a successful system. So that's my point of view, which will differ, I think, person to person. The key design elements for me, based on the experience that we've had, are One of them is you need to be comfortable with the risk prior or you need to be able to allocate funds prior to seeing the end work result. And that's a huge risk that you're taking, essentially. But you need to be able to quantify that risk through risk matrices. But for a successful WPS system, in my opinion, based on our experience, funds need to come at the onset and not at the end. And the big reason for that is that we're in a volatile system. Also, people typically in a WPS system or an operational mode typically need those funds in order to actually implement what they're trying to implement. So the funds at the onset are going to be used to build whatever it is they're building, and then they keep a portion as profit, which is completely fine. When you have the funds at the end, depending on the length of the project, because we're in our case in crypto, because it is the way that we use anyways to move around value. By the time you actually get the funds, in some instances, the value of those funds has changed considerably, and then now you need to incorporate you as an operational, I guess, team, that risk into your costs. But you have no idea the volatility that can happen in this space can be major. It could be a plus minus 80% in a couple of months. We really don't know. And so you're either putting in way too much buffer, or you're accepting an absurd level of risk, and then you in some instances what we've seen is you're not able to deliver the product because the funds are simply dried out, or what you thought you were going to make is no longer what you're going to make. So the first big, I think, key element is funds at the onset. Another big design element that we decided upon with the system that we're building is to have a base minimal administrative fee for the submission of a proposal. And the reason for that is because we also build the referendum system, where we're one of the key things in the referendum system. And when you don't have somewhat of a barrier, then you end up having an absurd amount of non-realistic proposals that are put up, and it really is taxing. It's actually a weight on the system. The people that need to review and approve these proposals only have so much time to give. And so when you put in our opinion, when you put a somewhat of a barrier of entry, you're able to really get the teams that are really serious about it, because they need to actually put in some collateral, and they're putting some funds, or they've got some skin in the game, and depending on what that amount is, it might be a lot of skin in the game for them, depending on how much they're looking for. And so they really need to be serious about this. And what it does as well for the other side, or the people that are reviewing this, they know that whoever is putting something in really believes that what they're putting in is worthwhile, and so you're going to pay attention even more. Plus, the amount of proposal that you're going to look at is going to be lower typically if the threshold, or if the amount that is requested in terms of administrative fee or barrier of entry is high enough. So those, I think, are the two big design features that we played around with it over the last year, that we've incorporated in what we're building in now, in a particular way. It is so in our case with the WPS that we're building, it's going to be 100 EOS, and 100 EOS is no spare change. I mean, it's $350 right now. 300, I'm Canadian, so $350 Canadian, $300 US, give or take, $290. And so it's, if you were thinking of asking $2,000 or $3,000, then you need to think, am I willing to put up 10% collateral at the beginning to maybe get that $3,000 out of it, which you then obviously incorporate that initial fee in your proposal as well. But it really makes people question whether or not they should put a proposal up, or maybe they go back at the drawing table, lobby a little bit more in the background before putting it up. So it needs to be a barrier of entry, but it can't be too high either, because you don't want it to stifle innovation either. So that amount, in our case, will be variable, but we will start at the onset with a 100 EOS setting, and because it's EOS, then you can tweak it over time. Right. If EOS goes to $50, then yeah, it would make no sense to have a 100 EOS barrier.
What parameters are important for DAC WPS systems, and what are the pros and cons with each parameter decision?
one of the big things that we learned over the last year by designing WPS systems is that everything needs to be on chain. We've got a blockchain, let's use it. I mean, the reason for the big, in my opinion, the parameter that's important for a WPS system at the core in our particular ecosystem is to be able to leverage the tools that we have, and the tools that we have blockchain, and the blockchain comes with this permission, this trustless system. So leverage that trustless system. So if you're going to have a system that's going to be overseeing funds or going to be having access to funds, then you really need to work into, as a parameter, how does that happen? How does it happen on chain, and how is it automated, so that there's no point in the workflow where the funds could potentially be put in harm's way, or that there's no way that any particular one actor could get their hands on the funds. That's always been going back to kind of the risk factor. You want to remove that as a potential risk. So in your design, in your parameters, you need to ensure that everything is on chain, everything is transparent, and those are the pros with it. The cons is that you need to code it, and it's not always easy. And so you need to get the right people to be able to write the smart contracts, and you need to make it so that it really is kind of a closed system that really can't be attacked. Another, I guess, important parameter that would be key is, where do the funds come from? And this we struggle with, right? So in EOS, for example, the original intent through the white paper, or the I guess perceived intent, because we really don't know, is all our perception of what was written, was that the WPS funds would come from, let's say, 4% inflation, whereas 1% inflation would go to the block producers. Over time, we've seen that a lot of the token holders and with big stake are opposed to this. Block One has even come out that they last year they said that they would be opposed to using inflation for utility of WPS systems. So one of the parameters that is really important for the design is, well, if it doesn't come from inflation, where does it come from? So various options have been popped up. It could work from donations, but is that really sustainable? If you really want to have base level infrastructure that's being built at a massive scale, are donations really sustainable, and are they scalable? Probably not. And so struggling with that parameter, or I guess designing that parameter, was really, really key in our journey.
So that might be something to think about on this DACAthon, of like, hey guys, where do the funds come from if it's inflation? So just maybe another thing that someone may spark up an idea out there. So looking forward to that. And let's move on to the next question. How do you compare DASH and BOS WPS systems? I know DASH has been quite successful with their WPS. So,
yeah, for sure. Really good question. I mean, in designing our systems, we actually studied the DASH system, so the one that we're going to be deploying, or going to be that we're building currently for the EOS.io mainnet, is very much inspired by DASH, but it is also inspired by the BOS WPS system, which we built and designed. And so how do I compare them? One of the key, I guess, insights that I learned by looking at DASH was that DASH is very successful. However, DASH has some issues, and one of the larger issues is that everything is hard coded. The DASH WPS system has not changed since it's been launched, and that is an issue. They didn't have the technology behind. It's a long time ago, 5 years ago, and so to give an idea, at some point DASH was worth, I'm not sure about the amount, but let's say it was worth a little over $1,000, I think. While the 5 Dash barrier of entry, well, that was $5,000 to submit a proposal. The amount of monthly Dash that they were giving at some point was something like $25 million. And that's when you saw, I don't know if you recall, but at some point Dash sponsored NASCAR, and they had a NASCAR with Dash on it and everything. And that cost something like 2.5 mil or 4.5 mil, something like that. And so they wanted to change the parameters in the system. They can't. Everything's hard coded. So if you want to actually make changes to the core system, you actually need to fork Dash. It's not happening. But we did learn a lot from that. We learned a lot from that in how masternodes behave. We learned a lot from that, from Dash, in terms of how many people actually participate in the ecosystem. how people interact. Timeline-wise, setting a beginning and an end, putting a barrier of entry. In their case, it's 5 dash. And so we learned quite a bit from the Dash model. But at the same time, because we designed the BOSS model almost a year ago now, it's almost a year old, we learned from that one as well, because we threw it out in the wild in the BOSS ecosystem with actual funds, with actual users. And so it's been running live. And there are a lot of key elements that we've learned that worked out really well, and some that didn't work out as well. And one that I touched upon earlier was the idea that the funds are given at the onset versus after the fact. So in BOSS, they're given after the fact, and we see that there are challenges there. And so we're working on a micro grant system that actually alleviate that, but it works within BOSS because of the way that BOSS is designed. Another thing that we learned from BOSS is that when you want to implicate, and this was also from EOS referendum, if you implicate every token holder for every decision, unfortunately, you can't reach consensus because it's just too difficult, and most people just do not have the time. And so in EOS, the idea is that people have delegated authorities in order to make those decisions for them. Those authorities in EOS, we call them block producers, whether they're the top 21 or whether they're any block producer that meets the pay threshold. You essentially meet the certain quota to be able to be designed as an official participant in the system. Why not leverage those people instead of every single token holder every time? So that is one of the key elements that we integrated in our new system as well, is leveraging the already elected, essentially, officials of the system.
So what kind of quality control, auditing, and vetting process do you feel is necessary for worker proposals? Obviously, this is a bit of a challenge for us right now.
Yeah, really, really good question. So in terms of quality control, auditing, vetting process, what's necessary, I think is really and the way we're going to go about it is going to be interesting, but it really is to have designated auditors, people that are essentially a third party that are elected by the system, or they're part of the system somehow, and they produce public reports, and then that data, and they have no authority. Essentially, all they do is produce reports. All they do is give the information out there for people down the line to be able to make better judgments as time goes by. Going back to, again, being comfortable with a certain level of risk, there will be some proposals that do not achieve what they said they would achieve. If I go based on Dash, there are some people or some teams that have in the past, over the last couple of years, submitted proposals. They were not able to accomplish what they said they would in the amount of time that they said they would, and some of them, that was their last proposal ever, because the system never had any trust in them ever again. And people recognize that, and we need to be comfortable with that. Others, they weren't able to achieve what they said they would. However, they were successfully able to explain why that was, and they were able to get funding in the future again. So just because you're not able to do what you said you were going to do, sometimes it's because of external factors that you simply cannot control. If, let's say, your timelines were tight, or if you have dependencies on other organizations, whatever the reason may be, but if you're successfully able to explain why and really kind of keep faith by not running away, that can be a positive, because then people can take from that, learn and grow, and that in itself can be a value add for the ecosystem. So in terms of quality control, auditing, vetting process, it's incredibly important, and it's an ongoing challenge. There's no one-stop shop fit solution type of thing. It's an ever-evolving process.
Got you, because then you're thinking about then who validates the auditors, and then they be bought, right? Like,
yeah.
So
yeah,
something
could
to
they
think about
potentially
for
be
DACAthon today.
Yeah.
Would you say that? So these kinds of things, something to think about. So we have a long way on that side, but I think that we will get there, and trial and error, and I feel that we just need to continue, like, more worker proposal systems need to get created and creations of it, and then it has to fail. So then when they fail, we know that okay, well, that doesn't work. So good thing we're just, right now in the beginning, and with Crown DAC, it is an experimental, really, it's a generic DAC that is just about giving you value for meaningful work, just to see what if we can come up with these tools, from the community itself. So I think it's
Hmm.
a beautiful experiment
Yeah.
and a beautiful shared goal. So with
And a
that,
lot of the tools we don't even know we need, or we don't know what they are because we haven't faced the challenges. And without hitting those walls, we don't know what's on the other side. We let them know that there's a wall there to be hit. So yeah, it'll take a lot of iterations, just like you're doing with Crown DAC. You just need to keep going at it
that's it.
and seeing barriers or failures in a way, not necessarily as failures, but opportunities to grow.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, and one thing that is also happening is that there was some gaming that was happening with the scoreboard, and I thought that, we all thought that was kind of really cool because someone had to try really hard to try and beat the game, and set up a bunch of accounts and type a bunch of things in the Telegram group. So I was like, kudos on you because this is helping us. And so
Yeah.
for those on the outside of this thinking about it, that it's just like, what's the point of this whole thing? The idea is to see what we would do, what the behavior is, and then study ourselves. And but it's such a neat shared goal to experiment on that truly is about can we meet our needs by doing meaningful work. I mean, this is kind of the basis of this all. And so yeah, I'm really proud to be part of Crown. So anyway, moving
Awesome.
forward, my friend. Do you see the number 13? Do you see WPS as the future of work? Why or why not?
I see a place for WPS in the future of work. I do not see traditional systems leaving entirely. I think that right now there is a very much a one-sided approach, and what we're going to see, hopefully, with WPS systems is now kind of the counterbalance. But having all one or all the other, I think you're missing out on a lot of opportunity. So all in all, I do not see it as the only one, but I do see a future for it, definitely.
Got it. So time and place for both, for all systems.
Yep.
Beautiful.
Yep.
So anything else that you want to add about DAC work proposal issues, or do you think we touched upon it? Is there anything else that pops into mind that the DACathoners can kind of think about in this DACathon?
I think the only other thing that I'd want to add is just experiment. Be comfortable with trying things in controlled environments, and within those controlled environments, be comfortable, be strong with your risk matrices, and just do iteration after iteration after iteration until you see that something works really well. Then you really see it out in the wild in the public for public testing, and that's when it becomes fun because you have no idea how on paper it can work. The actual code can work, the software can work, everything can be good, but how humans will interact with it or how populations will interact with it, that is data that is very difficult to obtain until it's actually thrown out in the wild. So be comfortable with that, and just incorporate whatever elements that you can think of that might be kind of a sounding board from the people into your design, and then just go back to the drawing board over and over.
I think, wow, thank you so much, Yves. What a phenomenal little segment about worker proposal systems. Yes, I hope this helped. And you have a few things to think about if you are working on a project with WPS systems. Really, really great talk, Yves. I really appreciate you. And thanks for being here. Thanks for supporting and participating in the DACathon.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for having me again, Kai. This is a pleasure. I'm really happy to talk about DACs, talk about WPS. So anytime you want to have me, go for it. I'm really looking forward to what comes out of the DACathon. So everybody, good luck. Have fun.
All right. Aloha, Yves. And
Hey.